Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that's
Dr.
correct.
Kriukow is the data analyst and a research consultant with work experience in the universities of Oxford and Edinburgh. And I believe you're now in Glasgow.
I'm not. I live near Glasgow, but I don't work there. I'm based in a small town near Glasgow, seaside town. Yeah. So
Oh,
that, but I don't work at the Glasgow University. That's what you meant.
oh, okay. Okay. So you'll be giving us some very practical advice by demonstrating examples of using NVivo, followed by some questions and answers. And I hope that people did see in the invitation the link to his YouTube video. So there is that to go back to. So without any further ado, Dr. Kriukow, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah.
joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for being here. So I like to see, obviously, that somebody wants to hear what I have to say. That's a good start. So, yeah, it was a good introduction. I don't think there's much to add apart. Yeah, there isn't much to add. I completed my PhD a few years ago, and I did a little bit of research assistant work and a little bit of lecturing, tutoring, more specifically, and then I gradually moved to just having my own business. So it's basically consulting and data analysis, precisely because there are two things that I enjoyed most in my PhD and after, and these were teaching and data analysis, doing data analysis. So I decided I'll just combine the two, and that's what I do. So I consult people, I explain, I teach how to do certain things, including what I will be talking about today, and I analyze people's data. So that's what I do. And yeah, and today, and just by the way, I'll show you, maybe, I'm not sure if I should show it now. Can I share screen? Yeah, I can. Let me just choose the screen I need to share quickly. I'll share the screen where you can see, just for the future, before I start, just wanted you to know that I have a Facebook page. This is my Facebook page. Hopefully you can see it. This is my website. So you have the URL here. And this is the YouTube page. So this is just for you to know, maybe for the future, if you're looking for resources about qualitative research and data analysis, there's always something to find there. So about NVivo, so now we'll talk about NVivo. It was my understanding, in a second I'll share my screen and I'll go through some things that you can do. In the meantime, if you have any questions, that would be great if you start typing them in the comments, in the chat. So when we finish, we have some nice questions, some things to talk about. And I'll talk about doing literature review in NVivo specifically. So I talk a lot on my channel and elsewhere a lot about coding, thematic analysis, but usually I talk about interview data, not literature review, although I do cover these things from time to time with individual students. So I'm not sure. I think at the beginning, what I want to know is a little detail about your skill in NVivo. So I was hoping if you could use the chat, and if you've ever used NVivo for anything, if you've started, if you launched the software and saw anything, what NVivo is like, it would be great if you could just type yes. If you've never done a single thing in NVivo and you have no idea what I'm talking about, apart from the fact that there is this software, type no. So this will just, yeah, I can see yes, okay. No. This just gives me some general idea of what level of detail I should introduce. So I think because okay, yeah. So I was hoping that you'd have some idea. Not everybody, but still, because obviously the time is limited, I won't be able to. Okay, yeah, I'll have to switch off the chat for now because I'll be reading. I can see some nice comments there as well. For now, I'll close it, but later I'll open it when I finish. So yeah, so because it's a new software, obviously I won't have time to go into every single detail of every single option and how to use it. So I was really hoping I will provide a very maybe brief introduction into, let me just open my screen again, into coding and NVivo. but then rather than talking about exactly how, how to code, how to delete, merge codes, I was hoping to talk more about how can you use it for literature review, and I believe that is more important to know this, because then once you understand why and how it can be useful, you can learn how to how to create a code, for example, even from my videos. So I think that's what we'll focus on. The first thing is that I'm not sure, but maybe some of you or maybe all of you are surprised that what you're seeing now maybe or maybe it's not, I'm not sure, a little bit different from your version. And this is because this is the newest version, but in March 2020, NVivo was updated. There is a new update. It's not a different version, it's just slightly different look. So the only difference is the menu. In that other version, the menu on the left is blue, but overall, you can find these things. The same things are to be found, so don't worry. Even if you're using a Mac version, that's probably the least convenient thing, because in the Mac version as opposed to the Windows version, there are some minor differences. But again, I do have a course about NVivo. By the way, later I'll give you a discount link if anyone wants to enroll. And I know that I have lots of students who are using Mac version and they still cope somehow. So yeah, okay, so that's NVivo, right? So again, very quick crash course. If somebody, I know that there was somebody who's completely new to it. What you can see on the left-hand side is called navigation view or navigation panel. So here, and the reason it's important is because it's not just for the literature review. Anything you do in NVivo, whenever you don't know how to find something, you will find it here. That's usually what I use. You can find the same things at the top. So these are like two different menus. There are a little bit more options at the top, but most of the things that I use usually are on the left-hand side. So there is data, there are codes that I will create. And this is called, the middle one is called a list view. So once we have, and in a second I will import our articles for literature review. Once we have our files, there is a list of files. Once we have our codes, we have a list of codes. So this is why it's called list view. And finally, don't worry about the nodes term, because I know it can be confusing. Basically, NVivo has their own terminology and nobody knows why, but these are codes. Nodes and codes, they are exactly the same thing. So now also a very quick note about using NVivo in general and what it will do and what it will not do. So one important thing to understand now at the beginning, ideally, is that NVivo will not give you anything that you don't know. And what I mean is, it will never do anything for you. It will never show you, oh, look, there is an interesting thing, or look, there is an interesting relationship, or anything like that. So basically, NVivo, it will not do anything that you would not be aware of. It will only follow your commands. So whatever you decide, when you see something and you decide, I'll create a code, or I'll turn these codes into a theme if you're doing thematic analysis. So any tests or like word queries or any things like that, you can do that in NVivo. But again, you will decide, I want to do that, and you'll so to speak order NVivo to do this. So just important to know that it's an extremely useful tool, but it is a tool and you have to decide what you want to do with it. So so about coding, also very quickly about coding, as I always say, and I say it in many videos on YouTube, coding in general, the purpose of coding is what's happening is you are labeling certain parts of the text. It doesn't matter if you're doing a literature review, like we'll do in a second, or if you're analyzing interview data. The purpose of coding or the process of coding involves selecting certain text and naming it, just giving it a name. So why would you want to do this? So basically, if you think about, for example, organizing a mess on your desk or a messy room, usually what you do first, how you go about organizing a messy room is you try, or maybe not everybody does it, but it will be reasonable to assume that you try to maybe put things into some categories where they belong, basically. So you put clothes here and books here and rubbish there. So that's a little bit like coding. So you want to assign these labels. You decide what you're going to call them. So based on what you see. So if somebody's talking about, you know, emotions, for example, I may just call it, you know, emotions or happiness. If he or she is talking about happiness, you're deciding what you want to call it. And the purpose is that you want to store these codes, which are just the labels that you assigned. You want to store them. You will be able to see them, a whole list of them in this middle view, like I said, list view. And the purpose is to become familiar with your data. Basically, that's the essence of it. You want to become familiar with what you have. So again, if you're doing, for example, interview transcripts, you just want to know what they talk about, right? So that's the basics for how you can think of themes later, because themes are essentially topics. So they are codes that were developed. They made it through the process when you delete some codes that you don't need. But like I said, I won't be talking about interview data too much. But as I like to say also, codes, it's useful way of thinking about codes is to think about them as a table of contents, as creating a table of contents of your data. So as you create these codes and they start to appear in a list, later, if you've had any experience with NVivo, you probably know that you can click on a given code and it will show you the extract, the part of the text that you coded. So imagine having 20 interviews or 50 interviews and creating a code, again, like I said, emotions or happiness. Let's say I'm investigating happiness. And then as I created this code and later I can see it among all the codes. So I'm at some point when I'm done coding, I'm looking at this table. Oh, I just heard some noise. I'm looking at this table of contents that I created.
Apologize. Can everybody just make sure they've got themselves on mute?
Yeah, I think it's already been muted. Yeah. So I'm looking at that table of contents that I mentioned. So my list of codes, and I can quickly find that emotions code or happiness code. I can click on it and it will show me every extract, every part of the text that I coded as happiness. So in other words, it will show me every time somebody in all my interviews, so I can have 50 interviews, talked about happiness. It's just extremely convenient, extremely useful and efficient when we're trying to understand what our data is about. So that's basically the essence of coding, is creating that table of contents. And I think that this is even more, this metaphor is even more relevant when we talk about doing literature review, because table of contents and literature make sense together. So, okay, so let me just show you. I will be explaining, but I'll be doing that quickly because it's being recorded. And for some that maybe they don't have any basics of NVivo, I just want them to also be able to later watch that and understand. So I'm importing, first we need to import to bring our files. So I'm going to data files, it's empty. If you right click on it, right clicking in NVivo again is a very common practice. If you right click on something, it's always giving you some options. So here I'm just right clicking anywhere on the blank space and choosing to import items. And here I prepared just some general sample literature. So let's say here, some articles about identity. Click OK, click import. The first thing that you may want to do if you're organizing your literature is under your files. So by default, it's bringing all the files here, but you may want to create folders just like I did on my computer. So if you right click, as I told you, right clicking is a very popular thing to do, very useful thing to do here. So you can choose to create a new folder. So I know these are about identity. So I decided, okay, I'll keep them separately. So straight away, I'm putting them into folders, and don't worry if you don't, because you can create folders anytime you want. You can delete them, move them. So sometimes I don't use folders, but now I thought since I'm doing a literature review, I'll just straight away have some kind of group. So globalization and migration is the other group. I'll import them. Okay, and here again, I'll create a new folder, right click, new folder, globalization. Select all of them and just drag them here. And finally, I have another group, anxiety. So literature about anxiety. And again, let's just have a separate folder. and move them there. So that's the first way I organize my literature. Of course, it's very basic, but it's good because we're storing them just like I did that on my computer. Back in the day, at the time when I was doing that, I had no idea NVivo can be used for literature review, and that was my biggest regret afterwards. So it's a very good idea that you're interested in doing that, because it's, whether you're doing a systematic literature review as a method, I wasn't sure if that's the focus, or you're just doing literature review, you organize your literature. For both purposes, NVivo is extremely useful. So we have them now. And so now let's talk about coding. So basically, in this presentation, I hope to talk about two things. I'm not sure if I will manage, but I'll definitely talk about coding, and I'll try to talk about file classifications. There are two options that can be very useful for literature review, but coding is the #1 option. So I'll talk about coding first. So let's just open any article, and here, let me just look at my list of things that I want to cover. Okay, I'll move. Can you see this black box from Zoom, or like, is it in your way? Because I'm not sure if I should put it somewhere.
No, we can still see your screen.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I can see that list of participants, and I wasn't sure if it's obstructing the view. Okay, so it's obstructing my view. Let's just move it here. Okay, let me just quickly want to organize it for you so you're following. Okay, coding, basically the very basics of coding. This is a detailed view, by the way. So you have navigation view on the left, list view. Now it makes sense because there is a list, and this is a detailed view. Whenever I double click on anything from this, it's opening the article. So I would suggest from now on that you just bring articles straight to NVivo, and when you do your reading, just do it here, because whenever you see something important or something you do want to mark somehow, you can just do it straight away from NVivo. So in order to create a code, so that's the first basic. Create a code. Let's say everything I do, so codes and everything will be just examples, remember. So just because I don't want to really sit here and read and think about my codes. So let's say I want, this is a research background, and I just want to code it as such, research background. Maybe I'm reading this and I'm thinking, okay, I may need that research background. So once you select here at the bottom, it says code add. So you just come up with the name of the code and press enter. And as you can see, the first code appears here. And now an important note. I'll show you these two things in a second, but you can do, I would say, two main approaches to coding when you're doing a literature review. So the first approach, I would say, would be coding specific concepts. So like I said, I have literature on globalization, identity, anxiety. Let's say that I'm doing a study on anxiety and globalization and identity, and I'm interested in the concept. So let's say definition of anxiety, or you know, what is an identity, or types of identity. So that's one thing. So I'll be coding these things. Whenever I encounter some concept that I believe is relevant to me, I'll code it. So let's say, you know, I'll just give some examples. Well, it doesn't matter. I won't be looking for them now. But let's say, you know, I found a definition of anxiety here, and as such, I will code it. Definition of anxiety. If I found types of identity, I'll code types of identity. So I'm just creating, as I said, a table of contents of all the content of these articles, the theoretical content. And the other approach, and you can use either or you can use both approaches, is to code, for example, structure. So let's say, again, and this happens a lot. I remember when I was in my PhD, at some point I was looking for these theoretical concepts. So for example, I needed to find definitions of identity. And at a different time, what I was more interested to see was, for example, how do authors justify the use of interviews? Because I was working on my research methodology chapter, or I wanted to see examples of you know, limitations section. I'm just going to open a different article because this one is not Very good. So so I wanted to see an example of a good limitations section, and I was only scanning. Oh, these are my real notes from when I was studying some time ago. So I wanted to see, okay, how do you write a conclusion section, right? So I may decide, yeah, I need an example of conclusion. I'll select all of this, and I'll create this code conclusion. So again, this appears in the codes here in this section. So I already have two codes. So these are two approaches. One of them is coding for, like I said, these concepts. One of them is coding the structure. And like I said, you can use both. So you can also distinguish, separate these two groups if you want by right-clicking on the codes here and creating folders, just like you did with your files. So I can, for example, create, two folders. I won't be doing just now, but I can create a folder for theoretical stuff and folder for structural, like I said, stuff. So the point is, yeah, I can use both of these approaches. So now let's just give you a couple of more examples quickly. So let's say I keep coding, I don't know, results. So this is the structure. I want to have a code that shows me how to present results. Let me see what else we have here. So I may have cultural capital. Let's say there is an important discussion of cultural capital by creating another code. And now also what you probably would like to see is what has been coded actually, because as you can see, once I deselect it, how do you know what's being coded? So to see what has been coded, and this is very important, and I do use this a lot, what you need to do is to open a given article, so like this one that I'm looking at now, and just here at the top go to highlight all coding. So it's showing me whenever I code something. The bright yellow stuff is not that because it was there, but now when I code, let's say, results, let's say results, as you can see, I can already choose the existing code. I'll code it again, and it's highlighted. So another thing, just a very quick basic thing, here the numbers that you can see, the number of files means how many articles, how many different files this results code appeared in, and the number of references means how many times I used it. So for example, let's say this is about results as well. The moment I code it, you can see the number of references changed. So this means I have two articles in which the results code was used, and it was used 3 times in total. So in one of them it was used once, and the other article I used it twice. So these are these numbers. And now another thing is, as you create this table of contents that I mentioned, so you can see the codes already building up, you can double click on a given code. And what's happening, this is what I was explaining at the beginning. It's showing you, it's just drawing from whatever I coded from all the articles. It's showing me, here are the results that you selected, basically. So you can imagine if I'm doing a large literature review and I have 200 articles eventually, and I have 200 of these results codes. When I open this, I can just quickly see, without having to open every article separately, I can see the results, and the same thing. So again, this is about identity. So, if I create a code, definition of identity, I have another article. And again, let's say I found another definition of identity, and there is yet another definition of identity somewhere here. Obviously, like I said, I'm just coding, I'm just selecting random stuff, so don't worry about this. This is just to show you. So as you can see, I have three times I used, you can see it here, definition of identity. So at some point, as I'm writing about identity, I'm thinking, I need to provide some definitions of identity. I'm opening NVivo and I'm just clicking on this, and here you are. So I have definitions of identity from these separate articles. So these are basic things. Like I said, I don't want to make this too complex because I still want to cover some more things, but you can create so-called child codes. So they are basically the hierarchy, so the structure of code. So let's say if you right click in the blank space, you can just create a new code here. So let's say definitions. And now I can bring my definition of identity, just drag it, either drag it and drop it here, or I can right click, cut it and paste it. So now I have definitions, I have definition of identity, and maybe here I'll find a definition of anxiety, and eventually I'll decide to also have it here. So we are creating this structure that's just clearer. And again, as I said before, it's like a table of contents. So you can have definitions, you can have, you know, different methods used. So if I'm scrolling and I find a nice description of how to do an interview, you know, or how to collect the data, I can do that, and how to collect the data, and I can have my group of codes, for example, about methodology or methods, and I can move it and bring it here. So this is extremely important and extremely useful, as there isn't really guidelines that say you should code this or you should code that. So this is also important. It will depend on your purposes. So again, if you're just doing let's say a normal literature review, so you're just reading and preparing for your study, you'll decide, you'll be fully, you know, in charge of what you want to code and what you're looking for. If you are doing a systematic literature review as a method, then again you have some usually criteria for what you are looking for. So you will be deciding about these things. So whether you want to, like I said, have these, you know, different definitions, whether you're more focused on the structure of, you know, different articles and how they present the results, for example, you can do all of them. And I would suggest, probably if you're early in your study, I would probably suggest just doing both and just reading. And you'll see that the good thing is that as you make that into a habit and you're reading in NVivo and you already have this developing list of codes, the good thing is that it won't be very time consuming to just, as you're reading, because one more thing I didn't show you, you can just select something and click on it and just drag it onto your code directly here once you have your code, so you don't have to type here. And imagine how convenient it is as you're just scrolling and just, okay, this is about definitions and this is about conclusions and whatever. So basically that's what I would probably recommend, just doing both. So focusing on the content and the structure, because then at some point you'll have both of these things and they are extremely important, I believe. So one more thing that you can do with coding, and this will be a link to to this other section of this speech. You can also code, for example, if you want to know the whole characteristic of the article, so not the content of it, not the structure of it, but just, for example, when it was written, or is it an empirical study, description of empirical study, or is it a theoretical article? So or, you know, or even what authors wrote this article. So these general characteristics of the article itself. And you can go, I guess, get away with using codes for this as well. So if you do decide to do this, of course, you can basically select any piece of article, let's say here, and just, you know, and just create a code like publication date. So once you open it, once you open that code later, it will take you to this article. But for many reasons, although, like I said, you can definitely get away with doing that. So if you know how to code, basically, you'll definitely manage to do your literature review. But to make things easier, and just for many reasons, I believe it's better for future analysis and for many other reasons that I don't really have time to go into detail of at the moment, I suggest that this task, so kind of assigning characteristics to the article, such as publication date and whether it's, you know, methodological, theoretical article, and so on and so forth, I suggest that for this we don't use coding, but the second option that I wanted to discuss with you today. So this option is called file classifications. file classifications. The main reason why I want to show it to you because knowing this will also open doors and possible opportunities for future analysis. You don't have to do that, but maybe you will, and it's good to know these things. So let me just show you, and again, just take you through the whole process. So file classifications. We have our list view here, so we have our articles, and let's say I want to let NVivo know, so to speak, what years, what publication dates are for these files, and maybe some other things. So generally, I want to select all these files, and I need to right-click on them, go to classification. So here at the bottom, and sorry, I can't see because of this. Yeah, and here, new file classification. So that's what you need to do. So it's basically assigning, letting NVivo know that they will be classified as something. The name of this classification is really not important. So every time I teach about NVivo, I have to explain because this is a little bit misleading, and I just wish this disappeared. But let's just call it article. This really doesn't matter because what happens, and I'll show you what is important, is are the attributes and values, which are the actual characteristics of the article. So as you can see here on the left hand side in file classifications, we can see article now. So basically we want to click on file classifications. We can see article classification, and if we double click on it, this is called classification sheet. And at the moment doesn't make any sense, does it? Because basically it's just showing the names of the articles. There is nothing more to look at. But what we'll do, just one moment, I will also assign other files to this article classification. And at the moment, I can already say, select this article classification. So I'm adding more of my files here. And again, this will be just more fun to watch. And okay, so now we have this list, and what we want to do is start assigning these characteristics. They are called attributes and values in NVivo. So in order to do that, you just want to right-click on article and choose to create a new attribute. Attribute is the characteristic. So attribute is the characteristic, value is the value that the characteristic takes. So for example, you can have like a gender attribute and then select values, males, females, and so on and so forth. So, and you can, so that's just the terminology, so you understand. So new attribute, I want to create a new attribute. And now I just need to decide what attribute. So what do I want to, what characteristic, what classification I am creating now. So, okay, let's say I want to show NVivo which of the articles are theoretical ones, like I said before, and which are empirical ones. So ones that which are about theory, definitions exclusively, and which ones are about published studies and description of methods and all that. So for this, we need to insert a text attribute, which means that I'm deciding about the values that it will take. So this will be called type of article. This is the general name, and values are what kind of types of articles there will be. So I'm adding a value. One of them will be theoretical. I know it's a lot, and I know it's probably overwhelming, but again, it's very good that this is being recorded, so you can later just have a look. And I'll add another one, empirical. Empirical. And click OK. As you can see, what happened here is that we already have this new column, but nothing has been assigned, because you have to manually tell NVivo which article is which. So you're just clicking and assigning these things. So again, this is random. I have no idea if this is true, but I want to assign this because I'll show you later how you can use this. So I'm deciding which ones are which. If you're familiar with your articles, with your data, you won't really struggle with this. So okay, I don't need to do all of them. Now let's create some more. So another new attribute. Now we want to have publication year, publication date. So the previous one was text attribute, and this one will be date attribute. So date attribute, I'll call this publication date. And just so you know, for your text type will be what you need 99.9% of the time. So don't worry about all of these. I literally hardly ever use any of them apart from text. Even the publication can be, for publication, the text value can be used, but it's just more convenient to have the date type. But otherwise, like anything else that you want to introduce, any classifications, characteristics, you will be completely fine with using the text type. So, but here I'll just show you date, publication date, click OK, because I don't need to insert any values, because as you'll see, what I do here now is select date. So when I want to assign these characteristics, it gives me the option to select date. So this was 2013, and you just go, you have this calendar, and basically you can find it. The other option, because I can see that it's probably very time consuming, I'll actually go with it the other type. So new attribute, text, publication date, and what we can do is click OK and just manually every time just type in publication date. So like I said, let's just use the text attribute. Let's just use that one. So here I am manually assigning these. I'll be finished very soon because I want to show you something quite interesting. 12, 3, 5, 8. Okay, I need to make sure that I have a couple. Okay, 2003. I'll show you something in a second. Okay, so this is so what's happening here is, as you can see, it's a nice, regardless of whether you will later use this option for the analytical things that I'll show you in a second. Even if you don't, what's happening here is quite a nice table of all your articles eventually, because you can introduce some more of these attributes. You can introduce, you know, anything you want. You can have the author. You can have, let's say, another one. Let me just create a new attribute again. Topic of the article. And as you know, I have 3 topics. I have anxiety, I have identity, and I have migration. I think globalization, migration. So again, so I can quickly, you know, just select here, and I'm creating this great table of all the materials that I have. So that's, like I said, the least that you can do is to have this great table. But then another reason why it may be useful to play with these file classifications is because there is such thing in NVivo as a matrix coding query. It sounds quite scary, to be honest, and quite complex. You don't have to, and you're not expected to always do this, to run this query, because many students that come to me, they are quite overwhelmed and very often anxious, because they feel like, or their supervisors, in fact, sometimes give that impression that you have to do that. You're using NVivo, you have to run these queries. This is not true. So it's only if you want to. Again, like I said, NVivo is just your tool, and you're using it whatever way you want to make sense of your data, to understand what you have. But in some cases, you may want to use that query, especially with the literature review, because if I analyze interview data, it's very rare that I do use this query. But let me just show you. So now, what we want to do, imagine that you have 200 articles, you have hundreds and hundreds of codes, lots of data, and now you want to start choosing specific articles, or, you know, focusing on specific topics in specific types of articles. So, for example, let me just quickly, okay, I'm not sure if I set everything up now the way I'm supposed to, but what I'll do, I'll first, in order to give you that example, I need to quickly use my codes a couple of more times, because I'm afraid that I'm afraid that what will happen is that the query will not show me anything. So let me just code a couple more things. Definition of identity, definition of identity, definition of identity. Okay, I'll be quick, I promise. I just want this to make sense. Definition of identity again. Okay, 2003, I think I need this. So I'm coding, as you can see. It doesn't take long once you have this this coding here. So okay, 2004 will be the last one. Definitions. Okay, so now the reason I did that, imagine that you have all these articles, all these codes, and now what I want to see is, for example, I want to know how many times I found, definitions of identity, for example, were used in articles published in 2004. So again, I have 200 articles, all kinds of publication years, publication days, and all kinds of topics. But I want to specifically know, for any reason, maybe I want to compare how they defined identity, how the term, the definition, the understanding of identity changed over years. I can have any reason, maybe definition of identity is not the best example, but if I wanted to see something else generally and be interested how it changed over time. So I may have any reason to do that. So for this, I need that matrix coding query. I want to see, again, definitions of identity only in articles published in 2004. So for this, I'm using the top level menu and go to explore. And this is where you can see the different kinds of queries. I won't go into detail of each, but you have text search query. That's actually quite useful. It's just for searching your articles. If you know you're searching for identity or a specific word in your articles, you can use this text search query. And word frequency is just like an extra quick insight. As the name suggests, it also gives you insights into the most frequently used words. So sometimes it can be useful. But now I want to show you the matrix coding query. So what we're doing here, as I said, we're setting up this query. The result will be a table. So we're now defining the columns and the rows of that table. So first, what's going to appear here is our code. Let's say definition of identity. You can either click here and manually select item and then find your code, or you can just drag it. Definition of identity goes here. And here I do have to go manually. So I want to check articles from 2004 and let's say 3 and 5 and compare. Select attributes values is what I need. And now I'm looking for my article classification and my publication date attributes and values. So click OK. Equals value. So publication date equals value 2003. I think that's, oh yeah, I have 2004. Click OK. And I need another one. So unfortunately I have to do it manually. So publication date equals 2003. So again, we're looking at how many times definitions of identity appeared in 2003 and 2004 articles. I'm not sure if there is any, hopefully there is. Run query, yeah. So here is our result. As you can see, as I hover my mouse over these things, so publication date 2004, 2 definitions of identity, publication date 2003, 1 definition of identity. We can choose colors here in the left hand side corner. It's a super simple, obviously, query now because I only did some basic classifications and one code, but there are so many things that you can do with it. Hopefully, and maybe even now through your head are, some good ideas are already going, because you can compare so many different things, or you can for example run a query on different things. You can run a query on 2 characteristics, so 2 attributes. So you can see, for example, show me all articles that were published in 2003 and were empirical studies. So instead of using code and an attribute, you can use two attributes. So type of an article, like I said, theoretical versus empirical, and let's say publication date. So show me all empirical studies from 2004, and it will give me this table. It will show me how many there are, and once you double click on any of these things, that's probably what I should have said before, you can actually see that. So yeah, because you're probably looking at that and thinking, why do I need that? It doesn't tell me that much. But see, I'm just gonna close everything that's in the way. Once I clicked on this, it's showing me the two, the two extracts. So I'm straight away, I can see, okay, this is what I've got. I have two extracts from 2004 on definitions of identity, and here I have one extract. Okay, so here it is. And then if I want to find exactly where it is, you can always click on the blue name of the article, and it's showing me directly, here it is. Here is what you coded. So yeah, I know that I have to leave 15 minutes for questions. And I know this was super fast and the way I spoke as well, but I really hope that at least this was an introduction. I'm more than happy to talk about questions. I'm more than happy to, maybe we can think about a future session again where I could go into some more details. But I'm really hoping that at least it gave you some ideas for what you can use this software for. And by the way, let me just quickly paste something in the, before I forget, in the chat section. What I pasted is a discount. So if you want to, you can later explore my course on NVivo. So I'm not here just to sell the course. So I hate to do that, but it's genuinely it can be useful. So, but I'm also more than happy to do a second session here. So let's look at the questions. What can we find here?
I think there was just one question from Helen's where she's asked, how do you, oh, there's another question. How do you use NVivo with a reference manager? For example, EndNote.
Oh yeah, I can see it. I hate to say that, but I don't really know how to answer this, because I know there are things and options to integrate these two. But the problem with me is that I'm extremely old-fashioned, and I've never came to grips with the referencing managers. So I, believe it or not, I always used, like for my studies and my PhD, I just manually did references. So I'm not really sure. I just never had to explore this option. So
I'm so glad there's somebody who's younger than me that thinks the same way, because I have always found these reference managers. In fact, I use NVivo as a reference manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably
all your articles are there. You can download them into EndNote and you just import them. Helen, I can put you in contact. I would suggest a 5-minute Zoom with Mpoi. She will be able to answer that question for you. Yeah, I also don't like the problem with those reference managers is they let you down at the 11th hour.
That's the thing, that I once actually I used Mendeley. And I used it in my research assistant work, so I was expected and required to use it. And I have to say that I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I remember that my supervisor at the time really encouraged me to do that, and she said it will change my life. But I'm not saying it's not. So many people, can be wrong. But I guess it may depend on your style, maybe, or something else. But for me, I just never really got used to it, and I didn't think it was very convenient. There were more problems that than things that it solved. So that's why, anyway, yeah, I never used the reference managers, and that's why I know you can integrate it with NVivo somehow. But I guess you'd probably be better off literally checking that online rather than asking me, because I just don't know. So
just to let the students know, Mendeley is free. EndNote has to be paid for. The university will give you EndNote, but when you move on from your degree, you lose it. So Mendeley is free, and there's another one that I believe is better. It's also free, called Zotero. So if you do enjoy a reference manager, have a look at Zotero. I'm going to ask Chats to give us another talk one day looking at Zotero. Demisa asks, is there a way to increase or decrease the size, for example, of the Zoom? Okay, sorry, that's too late to address that. I think that's on your own screen, Demisa.
No. It's a question about NVivo.
Yeah, he had problems seeing the screen, but that's, I think, on everybody's individual screen.
No. I think it's actually, I think it's a question about NVivo, whether you can increase the size of the detailed view window. If it is, because you can do that. So maybe it was like you said, maybe it was a problem just not being able to see on the screen. But actually, let me just quickly share my screen again. You can grab. Why can't I grab it? Yeah, you can grab this and you can drag it. Yeah, so that's, yes. I think it, maybe it could, and then you can, in the right hand bottom corner, you have this little zooming thing. So you can click on the plus, and you can also do this. So yeah, so I think maybe, if somebody, because I do use this, like sometimes I encounter articles that are written in a very small font, or at least that's how they appear in NVivo, and that's when I do use it. So you can drag this, you can drag this, so you can basically choose, the size of these windows. And there is also a way to undock these. So let me just see, because again, something I don't really use that often, but yeah, I just undocked this completely. So like you have a new, completely new window. Hopefully I can get it back. I don't use it very often, but yeah, you can play around with these things.
Okay, I'm going to open the questions to everybody. Just unmute yourself, put your video on and ask a question.
Or you can even type if you feel more comfortable this way, because I do want to make sure to just tell you a little bit more if you have any questions to tell you about NVivo.
I must admit, I believe that this software is the answer to doing scoping reviews, because I get all my PhD students to do a scoping review at the beginning of their study to identify the gaps in the research, to justify their work. And just going back to where you had definitions, say definitions of anxiety, you can maybe end up with 10 different definitions. And the thing about NVivo is you're seeing those 10 different definitions on one page. Yeah. So you can start to see patterns. You can see some people's definitions are qualitative, others use a more theoretical definition. And so you can start talking in your literature review about the definitions of anxiety, taking these different themes. And that was very difficult to do when you had a pile of 100 papers on your desk and you had to refer to them all the time. Or even in your reference manager, if you're reading a single paper at a time, it's very hard to actually see patterns coming through. So to me, NVivo has been a true answer.
Yeah.
Has anybody come? Okay, you comment, and then anybody else can just ask a question.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to say that that I agree completely, because I cannot imagine. I know it's, there was a world before NVivo, but and I'm one of the, I guess, generations that haven't experienced it. I only read and heard about how to do these things without the software, but it's even either like you said with literature review or just thematic analysis. I absolutely cannot imagine not using this software, because yes, it's possible, but you'll never get that level of insight, precisely because you can see all of these things at once. So like I said, definitions, if you're doing a literature review, you can quickly compare definitions, you can quickly come up with an idea when you're looking at all these definitions at once, and you're thinking, oh, actually maybe I'll talk about this. So yeah, if you're doing interview data analysis, even more so, you see everything that all the participants said, let's say on the topic of identity, if I'm asking them about identity straight away. So this saves you time. Otherwise you would be opening these articles, looking for them, getting tired, getting bored in the meantime. So it's not the same. So I would strongly encourage everybody to try to use this software, because it will, even if you don't feel like you're, very competent with technology, it doesn't matter. I've had so many people, even, a little bit older, sometimes learners, that I showed how to use NVivo, and they are happy, and it saved them time. So there is absolutely no argument against it. And yes, there are arguments in the literature, but there is also literature that basically responds to these arguments, because I have to say that I don't agree with any of them, and don't listen to people who say you lose touch with your data. It's to me, it's ridiculous to say that, because if anything, it's the opposite, because you are so aware and you can quickly,
Yeah, you get much more involved with your data. You're immersing yourself in your data. I disagree with that. I think there's a lot of fear from generally the quantitative researchers. There's a fear of qualitative research. And although we're using this as a desk tidier, really, when we're doing a scoping review, it broadens the horizons for people to start thinking about qualitative research. We have a question here from Chatradari. How compatible is NVivo with, say, Vellum or Scrivener? Chats, maybe you should come on live to ask that question.
I think it's,
thanks very much for your presentation, Jaroslaw. I enjoyed it. I normally get some of my students to use Vellum or Scrivener. These are organizational packages for one's thesis. Say, for example, you are writing a PhD, or you're writing an article. All that it does, it is a very advanced version of MS Word. And if you take MS Word, this is a much more advanced version. It's a better organized version. In other words, it's almost identical to what you have with NVivo.
Okay.
In terms of the tab that you have on your left-hand side, you can have your chapters listed, your individual chapters, and then you have a summary, and then you have the detail. Exactly. It's more or less an identical structure to NVivo. I just wanted to know how compatible, if you have come across it. I'm not so sure if you have. I'm just asking this off the cuff, where you can just simply drag and drop rather than retyping or saving and importing. Normally what happens with importing and exporting, you tend to lose sometimes some of the data, or some of the, not coding, but very subtle things get lost, like commas and full stops and punctuation and things. I just wanted to know if you've had any experience using Vellum or Scrivener. Or...
Unfortunately, again, I haven't had any experience with that. So I guess I have. I think I've definitely come across the name Scrivener, not Vellum, but all I can say really is that I know that it's definitely compatible with lots of different softwares and file formats, but obviously I cannot be sure about this one. But I know, and every year they've been increasing the number of possible formats. So it's quite, I would say, broad in terms of what you can import. Although when you say things like what you can do in Scrivener, I must say I'm not entirely convinced it would import it in the same format, like where you already have, you said on the left hand side, like this table of contents. Because what I know is, for example, if you have comments in Microsoft Word, it will not import these comments still, just like a raw document without your comments. So this is a little bit maybe of a limitation, but I guess can be worked around. I think it's more about now, if you from the very beginning, if you use NVivo for everything, that's obviously not a problem. If maybe you're switching from something that you've been using, then perhaps sometimes there could be some minor obstacles like this one, because I'm not sure it would import this format. But you would just have to check, and regardless, I think it's still definitely worth it. And just one more, another thing that I wanted to say, I know we're almost over time, but I just want to tell the students that another good reason to use NVivo, and this is literally what defined my career path, obviously, is precisely that when you look for jobs that have anything to do with any research, nowadays, it's a requirement to be able to use software. And there is I know there was a comment about where was it, about Atlas TI, I think. I'm sure I saw a comment about Atlas TI. There is another, well, there is Atlas TI, another piece of software. There is Max QDA, another one. But NVivo still is, firstly, it's definitely the most common, the most popular one. I've tried the other ones also, and I have to say that also the most, I believe, user-friendly and effective is NVivo, even though Max QDA may look a little bit more attractive visually. And also it's just the most recognized one. So for me, I remember I was, looking, I didn't know what I want to do after my PhD. I had no idea. And then eventually, so I was just lucky that I used it, because then I started to realize, okay, that's a skill that I have. And I went into that direction. And of course, like I said, I did research assistant jobs, research jobs. And then eventually I started, research consulting and data analysis business, which is obviously, like I said, so NVivo literally defined my career. But even if it's not that, dramatic in your case, it's such a good thing to have in your, in your CV, because everybody, if there is any research involved and it's qualitative research, you will be, either expected, or even if you're not, it will be a huge advantage if you say, I'm comfortable with NVivo. So yeah, so that's another good reason, I think.
Jaroslaw, thank you. Those are very wise words, and I'm sure that the students are hearing that. Thank you. We are beyond our time, and I really would like to invite you back for a second talk. This has been very useful, and it's exactly what I felt was needed for what we do here. I will take note of your Udemy account, and I will send that out on the email. And to the students, I think, really make an effort to go to the YouTube channel, the Facebook, and have a look at all the others. It really does help to broaden your horizons watching these